Hi! Today I'll be stringing up a racket like I typically would in a pro tournament. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to be stringing up a Prince Beast racket. I picked this one up because it's a 16 by 19 on a 100 square inch head. So this is probably the most common. And the strings that I'll be using will be Prince Lightning Pro synthetic on the mains and Prince Tour XP, which is a polyester on the crosses. All right, so I just got handed the racket from my wife Heather. She's the one that receives the rackets, and before she hands it to me, typically there'll be a label already stuck on the racket with all the stringing information, and I'll also have a work order form that'll confirm the string setup on the mains and crosses and the tension. So I just make sure that the label and the work order form matches. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and mount my racket. I know a lot of people will tend to mount their rackets with the butt cap up, and but I do mine's upside down actually. So there's a story behind that. If you want to know, then yeah, make sure you comment below. But I do all mine's upside down, unless if the player requests that it be mounted right side up. And I've had some players that request that. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount it on here and set the tension. It's going to be at 50 pounds on the main, so got that. Now on the main strings, I wanted to mention something that sometimes there's players, maybe at the challenger level more so than the higher levels, but they'll measure off some strings off of a reel and they'll just hand it to you like this. So I made the mistake of just cutting off 20 feet and assuming that there'll be 40 feet in that coil, but I ended up short on the cross after the crosses. So one of the tips that I have on a video, and I'll provide the link, is to make sure you measure just enough string that you need for the main. So in this case, I know there's 40 feet, but I'm gonna go ahead and pretend like this is a coil that I don't know how much is on here. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure out the first main just by lining up the hole and making sure it reaches the tension head. And I'm gonna measure a total of 8. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what I did is I'm holding that spot where the 8th cross ended. And what I'm gonna do is match that on the other, I'm gonna match that. Instead of counting out 16 mains, I'm gonna just go ahead and run my finger. So this is the that section where I was holding, and I'm just gonna run it until I reach the end of this string, until it matches up. It's right there, so I'm gonna just cut it off. So the rest of the string, I'm gonna assume that this is gonna be enough to do the crosses, and if it's not, then I'll mention to the player that, you know, I cut it exact. So you know, it wasn't my fault, but yeah, I've had a player that once that cut it just enough so there was only about this much to tie the knot. I mean, literally on the mains and crosses. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the Yusuke method, but I also like to use the offset tube. So I did another video where I did install and showed the method of using this. So I'll provide the link below if you're curious about that. Okay, so with the Yusuke method, I prefer to use it because I feel like it places less stress on the string when you're making that first pull. I know a lot of stringers just back it up behind the string clamp, and that's fine too, but I find that I like this method better. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 2, and then I'll go on the other side and do on the other side and do 4. So and I do everything 2-piece unless the player requests to have it 1-piece. So of course on a hybrid you have to do it 2-piece, but the tools on my tray, I like to keep it pretty basic. So I'll provide a picture and you'll be able to see what's on my tray, but I only have 3 tools on there, and the offset tube. And then I have 2 awls that, and I have nice awl holders that has yeah, aluminum holders, so it works out really well that I have that on my machine. All right, so I'm on the 4th main coming down here. I'm gonna finish this one and then go back to the right side. Now earlier I mentioned that there's a label that's already on the racket, and what Heather does is she actually puts the finishing time on there, so that kind of gives me incentive that I need to finish by that time. So typically it'll be like 20-minute intervals. If I need to take a break, then I'll tell her, because then she'll have to adjust the end time. But yeah, so that's part of the challenge when I'm stringing, to try and keep my my pace to that 20-minute interval. Right now I have my machine set on the middle speed, so I usually keep it at that speed. All right, so I did 6 over there, so that means I can come back to this side, and I'm gonna finish the rest of the mains, because after 6, then there's 2 more, which will complete the 8 on that one side. So I did cut tips on the end of these strings when I was cutting it, because that always makes it easier to put it into the holes as you're passing it through the grommet. All right, so I'm on the last main coming down. I pressed the knot function, and I got just enough string here. It won't reach going around the Diablo, so I'll just go straight into the jaws. And all right, so then I can tie off here. I typically will use a double half hitch, kind of old school, but I find that knot works for me, so I've kept it up over the years. All right, I'm missing a tool here. I was wondering why there was one. So I didn't have my parallel jaw pliers on my tray, so I'm gonna make sure I have my 4th tool on there. All right, so I'm coming back to this this side, and I'll finish off the last 2 mains, and I'm gonna release the string clamps together after I tie this knot. I just want to do it at the same time. So all right, so I'm done with that. All right, so on the crosses, when I measure it off, this is a 16-19, as I mentioned. So typically if you have 19 crosses, you probably just need 18 feet. That's what I found seems to be consistent with most rackets. Now you might want to consider if it's a polyester or something that's really stiff that doesn't stretch, but I find that it works. I'm actually using my machine to measure the strings too. So my machine happens to be about 3 feet in length, and I have a piece of black tape, so it's really hidden, but I can see it. Like there's a foot marker right here. So I know that this length is actually 2 feet. So I just need these 2 marks for pretty much everything, because I'm just gonna go 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. If I needed 1 more foot, then I would just go right here, because I can see those 2 marks. So, but I'm gonna stick with 18 feet since there's 19 crosses. All right, I'm starting the crosses from the second cross from the top. I did another video titled reduce friction and weave your crosses faster or something like that. I'll leave the link below, and you can check that out if you're wondering why I'm doing this. All right, so I'm gonna use the offset tube using the starting clamp, and I'm gonna drop it down to 48 pounds here. All right, and of course we're using the one head technique, so on all the crosses there'll be that one untensioned string so that your weave can be done a lot easier coming through each one. I have to wait till I tension the third string before I can go back and retension that first cross and actually tie off. So if you notice, when I release the clamp on the crosses, I actually take off the string clamp first, drop it, and use the gravity release function on the clamp. I think it's not as crucial on the crosses to do the base. That's just my preference, but I always do it that way. So it's important that if you do it one way, you always do it the same. So I do it only on the crosses though. So all right, so I'm gonna tie off on a polyester on the cross if possible. That's the preferred tie off, and it's better to tie it off in its own kind of string, on the same kind of string. And because there's a little bit of space here, I'm actually gonna use a pro knot for this one. So that way it'll fit right in that space right there. Okay, but I'm not gonna cut it yet. I'm gonna wait till I actually release that clamp. So let me just tension this string right here. And then when that clamp comes off, I'll come back and tie off, cut that extra length there that's on that knot tail. So I can get this out of the way right here. All right, so the rest of the racket is pretty much just a repeat process. You're gonna be tensioning string, weaving, clamping, and tensioning. So, but it's at this point, you really wanna stay in a rhythm as much as possible. So I mentioned that Heather will put that 20-minute interval. My goal is to actually beat that if I can. So there's certain rackets that go a lot faster if it has an open string pattern with softer strings. But then you get those that are the more dense string pattern with the thicker and maybe shaped polyester. And those are always, you know, tougher, and you gotta make sure you're not going too fast, otherwise you'll end up notching the string when you're pulling across on the crosses. So you can see that I use the pulling technique. That's the way I teach all my students to string that way, but not saying that that's the best way, because there's a lot of good stringers that can do it pushing, and some even like doing a stitching move. But I just find that the pulling works for me, and it did from the beginning, and I just stuck with it throughout the years. Also, you want to make sure that you're holding each cross string straight when tension is applied by the tension head. So you probably noticed that already, but I'll go ahead and do it or show you on the next one. Yep, so you're just holding it straight in place and just make sure it's pulling the tension in a straight line. I did another video where I did an experiment where the cross string was one was next to the other string like this, and I pulled it, and there was one that was far away, and there was I actually tested it with my RDC to see what the string bed deflection was. So if you're curious about that, and again, I'll leave the link for that video. But it is a lot better. I'm just telling you to hold it in a straight line and make sure you're really keeping that as straight as possible. All right, towards the end, throughout the stringing of the beginning part of the crosses, I was holding on to the end so I didn't have to go, you know, looking for it. But towards the end, you can let it go because it's short enough where it's easy enough to reach for the next cross. All right, and I did measure the 18 feet. Looks like it'll come out just right. And again, this is polyester, so yeah, if it works for polyester, it should work for pretty much every string. If I get to a point where I can't go into Diablo, I'll just go straight into the tension head jaws and bypass the Diablo. Like, we're getting to that point. Oh, I can go around it now still, so this is probably the last one. I'll do it like that. All right. And I might get to a point where I will not be able to do the one ahead. We'll see if I can do it on the last string. All right, so I'm bypassing the Diablo. I'm straight in there. Yeah, it's gonna be tight. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and pull this string already, because I know already based on what I have left, it's gonna be tight. So this would be a tougher weave. You don't have that untensioned string. But the reason why I like the pulling technique is you can pretty much use it for all situations. So like this, when you don't have that one ahead untensioned string. All right, so I'm making sure that this string is above the other string on the outside. I want to always make sure that it's running parallel to the other cross string. All right. All right, so I am gonna tie this off. I have extra string, so I'm just gonna cut off maybe a couple inches so it's a little bit more manageable. And I'm gonna tie it off on this cross string right here, which is a polyester, you know, the same string, and we'll just use the same knot that the pro knot, so it looks consistent with the one that I did at the top. Now, when I was holding each string straight, the goal was to try and make sure that the tension was consistent, but you also want to make sure that the strings are straight at the end. So typically the mains will kind of bow in a little bit, so I find myself always pulling it out a little bit. But then when you get to the crosses, I like to lock my turntable and look at it sideways. For me, I can see the strings in a straighter line that way. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I mean, I'll take it off and do the final check just to make sure. And if I see anything, I'll just do it by hand looking at it. So yeah, there it is. All right. I hope you enjoyed today's sneak peek into pro tournament stringing. Now, if you enjoyed this content, I'll be coming out with a video in a couple of weeks where I'll bring Heather, if she's willing, to talk about some of the things that we do at a pro tournament, like preparation and setup, the system we developed, and also how to make it fun. I'll also reveal the tournament that I broke my daily record of racket strung. Thanks for watching, happy stringing, and let your strings play.